anyway to jump at 3 p.m. or in 30 minutes. Sorry, depending on
all topics are from you, so
yeah, I've seen
it's
that.
up to you how fast you
Yeah,
want to go.
and the topics were more okay to collect IDs. Let me start with the first one. So as you may know, in the latest Prometheus Operator release, so v055, we had a contributor that implemented or wanted to implement like the switch from using the endpoint role in the Kubernetes service discovery config to using endpoint slice. So the idea was that if the endpoint slice API endpoint or resource is available from the Kube API, then the operator would automatically switch using the endpoint slice role. The third thing is that it doesn't work because there is a bug in the way we detect if the API resource is there or not. And even if we fix the bug to fix like the discovery of the way we discover the API resources, then it doesn't work because by default we don't assign permissions to the Prometheus service account to discover, to list and watch and get endpoint slices. So in fact, the issue is more complicated than what we initially anticipated. It's probably instead of doing switching automatically from one role to another, that's probably something we need the user to tell us, because otherwise we'll probably break most of our users.
Do we still have a reason for supporting endpoints? I mean, endpoint slices are supposed to be the way forward, so why not just default to that?
If we default to that, then people will have to fix the airbag permissions on their clusters. Likely to grant the Prometheus service account permissions on the endpoint slices.
But doesn't the operator create the airbag or not?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not sufficient to add the permissions in the bundle because
Yeah, then all the existing installations need to somehow, people would need to fix it or to update the permissions. So we can't like from one release to another to decide that suddenly you need to grant permissions on the endpoint slice resources rather than endpoints.
The Prometheus team has said that endpoint slices is a way to go for the future.
Even like the Kubernetes
okay.
Yeah, maintainers they are supposed to resolve all the limitations from the endpoints. It's just that endpoints are there. They have been forever, and they'll continue to be there because they are v1. So, so they are like explored various options. First one would be like to let in the service monitor, for instance, to say I want to use endpoint slice role instead of endpoints. And in parallel, we could also, like at the Prometheus custom resource level, we could have a new field that would say by default use endpoint slice instead of endpoints.
I would maybe just do this at the CLI level, the operator level, maybe.
Yeah, at the operator level, so that could be useful for people that control everything. Like when you manage the Prometheus operator, you manage the Prometheus custom resources, and you manage the service monitors. Then you can, at the same time, you can say, now I want to use endpoint slices, so I'm going to update all my airbag permissions, and I know it will work. If I take the other extreme, which is what we do in OpenShift, is we let individual teams to manage their service monitors, and so they need also to manage the airbag permissions. So they need to grant additional permissions to the Prometheus service account on specifically like the endpoints in their namespace. So that would mean for us, if we take the OpenShift use case, we need to go to all the teams and make them update their role and role by basically the role they grant to the Prometheus service account to make sure that they grant what should be. I think there are a variety of use cases, like there are people that control everything. So for them, that's not a big problem. And there are cases where it's more using the operator as a way to self-service monitoring for individual teams. So now we need a fine-grained control on which role we want to use.
Okay, but in OpenShift, isn't the Prometheus also managed by one team, as well as the Prometheus operator?
Yes, but in that case, what we don't manage directly are the service monitors.
So right, but the RBAC is on the Prometheus. So teams shouldn't have to tweak RBAC rules, I think.
So the way it works is when you want your component, your service to be monitored, is you declare a service monitor and then you grant permissions to the Prometheus service account on your namespace, like to be able to list endpoints, to list pods, to list services. So that my initial take is that we need more flexibility, or at least to allow people to migrate from endpoints to endpoint slices. We need to provide some flexibility, which probably means that we need to introduce a new field, unless somebody has a better solution. The other something that we may explore is having the ability for the operator to check whether the Prometheus service account, or what are the permissions that the Prometheus service account has been granted, and then decide, oh, you only have permissions on the endpoint resources, so you're going to use, for this particular config, I'm going to use endpoint role. On this namespace, the Prometheus service account has permission to view, to list and watch endpoint slices, so I can use the new role instead.
So with subject access review somehow.
Yeah.
I think these last options can be quite confusing. You deploy Prometheus and you may have no idea what you're using. Is it possible to send, like, let's say on 056, we are using both, and the user tells what to use, and we explicitly tell, okay, on 060, I don't know, we are removing the slices. Removing endpoints.
Yeah,
then
I think
we have to keep that in mind to not forget.
Yeah. Now, given the guarantees we have on the APIs, as soon as we have something, we add something like, now you can define in the service monitors whether you want to use the role endpoint or the endpoint slice. We are kind of obliged to keep it until we go to V2. That's
okay.
I mean, we can definitely make exceptions, but that would be the expectation. I think in the I think it's fine to carry the burden of, okay, we need to add a new field, and we want people to migrate to the new thing because that's probably better for them. As long as it's documented, advertised, we'll have to carry it basically until V2 happens, if it happens. And maybe we can do something different, for instance, for the Prometheus agent. I mean, for the Prometheus agent, we could say that we don't care. We always use endpoint slices because
in the so in the Prometheus configuration, how easy is it to switch between endpoint slice? Is it just the string that needs to be replaced?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, in that case, I think the implementation difficulty should be fairly low, I would say.
Yeah. This doesn't introduce like a completely different code or code path. That would be just if this field is true in the service monitor, then you use that role. If not, then you use the older role. And otherwise, the configuration, the way the configuration is marshaled is the same.
And maybe one last question. So for the default, would the default stay endpoint indefinitely, or?
Yeah, I don't know.
What we might do is, for existing resources, we can keep. But then you have to see. Yeah, we're gonna somehow have to see if. Yeah, what I had in mind is, if a service monitor was created before a particular version, it would stay on endpoints. New ones would go to endpoint slices, so that we have some way to incentivize people moving forward and changing their RBAC policies.
The other option would be to say that at the Prometheus level, you can define the default. Say by default, choose the endpoint slice role, that would apply unless somebody explicitly set in their service monitor, I want to use endpoints because I've not migrated yet.
That would also make sense. Okay, but so in conclusion, I think adding a field, I don't see, any alternative to adding a field now.
Yeah, I don't think we can avoid that, to be honest. Yeah. Like you mentioned, the other option would be to say add the CLI argument for the operator to just switch and enforce one role or the other, but I think it would be too inflexible. Like in some cases, for some use cases, that might be okay, but for use cases where basically people either so developer teams either manage their own service monitors or even manage their Prometheus resources, then that's going to be would not fit for them, probably. And it's only for service monitors, like pod monitors, because you monitor pods, you watch pods, you don't have that. And for probes, you watch ingress. So again, that's only a problem for service monitors. I guess, like Arthur said, we can say in a later version of the operator, we would assume that everybody has migrated to endpoint slice, so that would become the default somehow.
Yeah.
When you say API v2, you mean
CRD.
1.0?
I mean CRD. Yeah.
Okay.
We still have this kind of inconsistency between the version of the operator, which is v0 something, and the version of the CRDs. We're kind of stuck because the Prometheus service monitor, pod monitor CRDs are v1, sorry. We have this obligation that, not break people, or at least if we want to break them in the future, then we must say it explicitly and tell them that this field you can use it, but use it at your own risk. Okay, let me. I'll put a comment on the issue, and I'll see what maybe Philippe has to say or Pavel. Again, there are no urgency. Hopefully, we didn't break anybody with the new release. It's just that the thing we advertise would be possible is not possible. So, yeah, the next topic, or if you have more comment on that one, but the next topic again, unless you have something that you want to mention there, but it was more to discuss the feeling about switching the alert manager config CRD. So currently it's V1 alpha 1. So it's really, in terms of Kubernetes documentation, that means use it or don't use it in production. That's not tested. That may break. I think we've got now pretty good coverage with like it's mapping quite nicely with the alert manager, what the alert manager supports. So that would be probably time for us to switch it to V1 beta 1. Again, I've probably don't need to go into the details about what we want to clean up. That would be in an issue that I would file with Philippe, but get the general feeling about whether you see any blocker for that to happen or not.
I don't use it yet.
Yeah.
I don't have an opinion.
Yeah. We plan to be transparent. We definitely plan to. I mean, we already use it in OpenShift, and we plan to use it even more to make it like generally available for customers. So we are committed to supporting it in any case. So
nice.
But yeah, I'll file an issue, and so we can discuss the details about what would happen, what we would remove, what we would need to modify before switching to V1 alpha 1, beta 1, and how we would handle also the migration for users, if we handle it, and how we do it. There might be a few hurdles in the way, because I don't think we did it before. Like the other series were V1 from the start. So
okay, makes sense.
And the last one is that we got someone submitting a PR recently. I don't think I put the link in the document, but the use case is there are a few people that want to override the host aliases field in the pod template. Hey, Joe. Which is not exposed in the Prometheus CRD or Alert Manager CRD or Talos Ruler CRD. There are various issues that have been filed, and one of the comment that was made again and again is that sure, we can add that field, but then we'll end up with a bloated CRD, because now we expose basically every pod template field in the Prometheus CRD, for instance. So over time it grows, the size of the CRD grows and grows, and people basically don't know exactly what they need to do. We have already the possibility to patch the containers definition with the init containers and containers field in the Prometheus CRD. So one idea would be to do the same at the pod level. So let people like embed a pod template in the Prometheus CRD or dot manager that would get merged with the pod template generated by the operator. So you would have the flexibility to, if you got a niche use case where you need to define or to tune a particular field in the pod, then you would be able to do it. The main drawback is that the user experience is not optimal because you need to know what would be, how to do it, and what would be the end result. But that would avoid a world class of user reports that want to tune that particular field in the stateful set definition. And that's not possible because the CRD is locked down quickly.
I mean, I think, I think with this strategic merge patch, it's very hard to, I think it's dangerous doing that because it overrides internal implementation details, or you have to be aware of them. So if we change the way that we define the pod template in the future, that might break users that use the strategic merge patch. Because, for example, you can't, if you're using arrays somewhere, those arrays will not be merged. They will be replaced. And since the host alias or aliases is, it's an optional field, yeah, it kind of extends the CRD a bit more, but on the other hand, for the basic, for people that don't need it, they don't need to specify it. Yeah, I don't see too much harm, to be honest, in having it.
Yeah, I'm definitely like, I've got no definitive answer. Like, I think for this particular case, since we've seen a couple of people asking for it, I think it's a good definition that, yeah, that might be useful. It's not only one person asking for it. That came back a few times. But now maybe we also need at the same time, like since we already offer a way to patch the containers definition, then maybe it's also good to offer the same, with the same warning, like this might break you in the future, but at least for people to experiment. But yeah, I think I've discussed that with Philip. It was like more on the side of saying, well, if we start to add more and more fields, then that's going to be to make the CRD more complicated to use. But yeah.
Are you going to implement that in the next 2 weeks?
I don't know.
Is that
why is that? Yeah.
I feel like this is quite controversial. Like, the operator makes things easy to install, and then we need to extend the CRD like way too much to make every single possible case, and then we add like this patch, which allows you to do whatever you want. But then, why use operator if you're doing your own patches? I don't know. It feels weird adding it. But
adding the patches or adding the one field.
Sorry.
What do you find strange? Adding the ability to patch the resource, or
adding a patch? Like, okay, we make that possible, but like, it's I feel like us adding a field like this feature is telling people that that's okay, go ahead, use it. But I guess we don't want that, right?
Yeah, for me also the patch. I mean, for containers makes maybe sense. For pod templates,
yeah, I had a quick look. Like, probably what we could do is check how many fields, because there are already many fields in the pod that are at the pod template level that we allow people to customize in the Prometheus CRE. So maybe we can step back a little and say, okay, what are the other fields that we don't allow, that are not exposed in the Prometheus CRE, that people may ask about in the future? Like, my gut feeling is that maybe host aliases and DNS config are missing, but maybe not many more. In which case,
just to be clear, I don't want to block anything, right? I just saying that it's kind of awkward. This patching.
I totally get it. Yeah, I think like the fact that the user experience, I mean, it's in any case, like Philip said, that will always be marked as this is something that probably you shouldn't use because in the future that might bite you.
Yeah.
We offer no guarantees that in the future the Prometheus operator wouldn't generate something completely different that would override what you want to do.
Yeah, and yeah, we already allow specifying so many things like volumes, I think security contexts. So if we have to make a change, I would be for adding the field. Because for containers, I can definitely understand that it's actually very hard to expose fields because there's this array of containers, it's all nested. But for pod templates, since things are flattened out, yeah, that's how I would, yeah, that would be my, so if we have to expose something, I will expose the host alias and DNS config.
Yeah, I think like what you said, like let's evaluate how many fields are missing, so to say. And if it's only like we feel that we may add a couple more in the future, but maybe it's valid to extend the CRE to cover that. Okay, I'll have to drop, so, but we can. I'll add a note on one of the issues and probably try to ping people on the Slack channel about it. Yeah.
All right. Stop the recording.